Guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the movie The Starling and how I can relate or not relate to things that were mentioned or showed in the movie. I'm not going to be talking about the entire movie or like giving a full review on what I think about it and giving it a rating or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking specifically about the points that I felt like resonated with me or didn't resonate with me. Sorry if you see me looking down. I wrote everything in my notes so that way I could make sure that I touched on every topic that I wanted to touch on. As I was watching it, I would just jot something down really quick. The first thing I put was when her boss was telling her at work that she was acting different. In this case, this wasn't anything that I could really relate to because after everything happened, I actually went into my job that I was at. I was at Toyota for almost 2 years. They knew me way before I even met Tommy. My main thing was I didn't want anybody looking at me differently. I didn't want anybody treating me any differently. So as soon as my maternity leave ended, I went in and actually quit. I told them, you know what, thanks for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, but I just don't think there's a place for me here anymore. And it was mainly because I just did not want to deal with everybody treating me differently. So what I ended up doing was just staying at home for a couple of months, and then I started my new job, which was at Ulta. So when I got to Ulta, I actually did not tell anybody about what happened. Only a few people there knew what happened, but I didn't openly tell everybody about my situation for that reason. I didn't want them treating me differently. And I think I waited about 6 months until I actually started forming relationships and friendships with everybody there. And then I came out and told everybody what happened, and it was during the Ariyas wore bracelet thing, but they didn't treat me any differently because of it or anything, and I really appreciated that. The next part of the movie that actually kind of touched me a little bit was when she was getting rid of the stuff. So they did mention that she didn't get rid of the stuff until almost a year afterwards. After Ariya had passed away at the hospital and we were on our way home, she passed away in Delaware, which was about an hour away. So by the time that I got home, I noticed that there was a few of my family members there already. They wanted to take out her stuff from the room. We were living in my father-in-law's basement at the time, so all her stuff was in our room. But as soon as I came home and I noticed what they were doing or what they were trying to do, I told them no. I told them no, don't touch it. Leave everything there. I did not want to get rid of anything. These items were living proof that she was real, that she was here. We were expecting her. She was going to be a part of our lives. She is going to be a part of our lives, but just not in the way that we wanted her to be. So for me, getting rid of the items just meant that I was trying to erase her. And again, this is just how I was dealing with it. Everyone deals with it completely different, and it's totally okay. But for me, I wanted to hold on to everything until I felt like, okay, I can part with this or I can part with that. And eventually throughout the years, I ended up giving some stuff away, but for the majority of the stuff I kept because I knew one day I was going to have a daughter again. And I wanted my daughter to use everything that was gifted to Ariya as hand-me-downs from her big sister. So now that Melina's 5 months old, she has used up all the stuff that was her sister's, which is awesome. And I definitely do not regret keeping everything. I'm glad I did. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was when she was at the doctor's office and he said that she was in the anger stage and that the next stage was going to be depression. I definitely felt that. I was angry at everyone that was trying to look at me a different way, that was treating me a different way, that was trying to tiptoe around me. And I just didn't want that kind of attention. I didn't want to pass by and people be like, oh my gosh, that's the girl who lost her daughter. Or did you hear? She's the one who had a daughter who passed away. Her baby died. I just hated all those whispers. I hated all those looks. I hated the pity. Most importantly, I hated the pity that came out of everybody's eyes, and that made me so angry. I didn't want to be labeled as the girl who lost her baby for the rest of my life. That's not what I wanted to be labeled as. At the time, I was so angry at God for tricking me into thinking I was going to be a mom to this daughter. I was going to raise her. I was going to be able to hold her, breastfeed her, do all the things you're supposed to do with your baby. And that in itself was consuming me. The anger that it was oh my gosh, you're pregnant. Here's your baby, 40 weeks. You're about to give birth. You're going to meet your baby. I hear her cry. I hear her open her eyes, and then she shuts them forever. It was just so crazy to me that it felt like I was tricked. I don't know. But God has since given me that peace and reassurance that that wasn't the case. And that his plan is greater than my plans, and there was a reason why he took her back. Like, who am I to question God, you know? So, and then I was angry at my husband for being able to go to sleep, stay asleep, and be able to function the next day. Like, I couldn't sleep for anything. My anxiety was so bad. I just kept reliving those 3 days at the hospital over and over and over again. My anxiety was through the roof. Like, I would lay down, and as soon as I laid down, I would just picture looking at her covered in all the cables, and then all the scares that we had when like her heart rate was dropping. Everybody would just rush in the hospital, all the machines were going off, and then they would bring her back. And then the next day, the same thing would happen. Then it ended up us having to take her off the ventilator because she was not going to get better. And it was just gonna get worse from then on if we would have left her on the ventilator. I kept thinking about our decision over and over and over again. And the anxiety was so bad that I ended up having to take medication for it in order to fall asleep. I took medication for roughly about, I wanna say it was from like 4 to 6 months. I'm not entirely sure. And I would take one pill every single day to help me sleep and to ease the anxiety. And I'm glad that I did. The sleep deprivation was making my anger and my grief and my depression so much worse that I really, really did need to sleep. And I'm very appreciative of the medication that was able to help me at that time get some sleep. But going on into the depression part of it, I fell into a very, very deep depression. For the first 5 months, I tried to like keep a positive note, and I would be fine during the day, but then at night I was a completely different person experiencing completely different emotions. I was just so sad. Like, I was so sad, and I was just so consumed with grief. I would go to visit her grave in the middle of the night. Like, I wanted to feel close to her. I would just go there and I would just cry and just scream, like, why? Like, why did it have to happen like this? I would have never thought in a million years that my daughter was going to pass away from something that is so rare from a child to pass away from. Like, GroupBStrep is something that is very rare because doctors pride themselves in being able to prevent it by taking the antibiotics. It's just unreal to me. I never would have thought that my firstborn was going to die, that I was going to be able to carry her to 40 weeks, experience labor, give birth, and then her die before I even had to get a chance to bring her home. Like, it's just, I don't know. The reason why my depression was lifted was because I got pregnant with Ezekiel. That was the only reason that I was kind of able to like push the depression to the side and completely ignore it, because I finally had something else to look forward to, which was my rainbow baby. But it was kind of like a different type of experience in the beginning of that pregnancy. I follow someone, her name is Judea. She tells her story of her daughter passing away from SIDS. Her Instagram handle is It's Judea, if you wanted to look into her story. But I admire her because every single day she shows her emotion, she shows her grief. And her daughter, it's about to be a year since her daughter passed away, and she still expresses every single thing that I felt during that time that I don't talk about anymore. Not because I'm healed and I'm like moved forward and this, no, it's just because I just don't talk about it. I really admire her and how she tells her story and how she talks about her grief. And she just recently found out that she was pregnant again. And she says, and somebody had asked her, like, how do you feel about this pregnancy? Are you excited? Are you happy? Are you hopeful? And she was like, this pregnancy feels desperate. And she's like, I'm happy, kinda, I'm sad a lot, but if I could describe my emotion of this pregnancy in one word, it would be desperate. And when she said that, I related 100% because that's how my pregnancy with Ezekiel was. Like, it was desperate. I needed him. I needed to give birth to him. I needed to make sure that he was healthy. I needed to make sure that I got to take care of him, raise him, and watch him grow every single day. Like, it was a desperate need to be able to be a mom to my baby that I didn't get a chance to be with Ariya to the extent that I wanted to. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the phone call with her husband when she mentioned their daughter's name and he was instantly triggered and hung up. So I was never triggered by anyone mentioning her name. That is one thing that I can say hands down. I love when people ask me about Ariya. I love when people ask me how she died. Why? Because I get to spread awareness of how she died and help prevent it from happening to somebody else. We have turned something that is completely tragic into some kind of story of hope and a prevention for other babies. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want her name to just be, oh, that's our child that died. No, like her name is Ariya and her story is Ariya's roar, and this is what we do, this is what we say. Every year we have a scholarship that is given to somebody in the medical field because we want people to know what it is and how to prevent it, and we want her name all over it. Like mentioning her name and talking about her, talking about the experience, talking about the pregnancy, talking about the death even. All of it has its own purpose, and we use it in celebration of her. We use it in remembrance of her. There's never anything negative that is tied to Ariya's name. Never. And that's what I wanted. So I'm never triggered. That is one thing that I tried to make clear whenever people would kind of like tiptoe around me. Like, no, like I have a daughter. I have another daughter. Her name is Ariya. She passed away, but she is still my daughter, and this is what we do. This is her story. The next thing that I wanted to touch on was when they share about the husband's suicide attempt. I want to mention that this part did not relate to me at all. I never once thought about suicide. That thought never even crossed my mind. I always wanted her here with me, not the other way around. That was something that God made sure that he kept far, far, far away from my mind, and I'm glad about it. Even though I did get sunk into depression, I did not let myself get there. Tommy didn't let me get there, and God was like, no, you're gonna deal with your emotions the way you gotta deal with your emotions, but don't even think about that. And I thank God. The next thing is the guilt part of it. The husband mentions that he feels guilty that he overslept that day, and the guilt, I want to say this part is probably going to make me cry. I'm not gonna lie, because I could sit here and blame myself for what happened all day, every day. And I try not to think about it as much as I can, because this is definitely a trigger for me. Because how I think about it is that my body made her, and then my body turned against her and harmed her in the way that took her life. Like, that's something that I literally live with every single day. And maybe it's something that I still need to work on to stop trying to blame myself, but that's just me being completely honest with you guys. But they have assured me that there was nothing that I could have done. There's nothing that, but knowing what I know now, if I would have known that because I didn't know my water was broken for 7-8 hours prior to me going to the hospital, that there was a small chance that she could have gotten this infection by giving birth, and the one way to completely prevent it was a C-section, I would have done the C-section. So that is why we tell her story. Ooh, okay. I'm not gonna say too much on that because that is still definitely a trigger for me. Okay. The last point that I wanted to touch on was the disconnect between her husband and her, and how they were feeling, how she couldn't talk about her feelings, and how they ended up going their separate ways for a while. That part I definitely can't relate at all. In fact, I actually more so pushed away family, and the only person that I felt could understand me, and the only person that I felt that could actually hear me completely and hold me and care for me was my husband. He was the only one at the time that could possibly understand what we went through, because he went through it too. And that I'm very happy that the one thing that did come out of it was that it did bring me and him closer together. I'm glad at the end of the movie that they were able to find their way back to each other, because it's actually very common for couples who have lost a child to divorce or separate or go their separate ways because they can't stand being together, and it's too hard being together. So that tends to happen a lot. So I'm very fortunate in the fact that that didn't happen with us. We persevered, we pushed through, we got closer, and we eventually were able to start a family again together. But guys, that is all that I have for you. That's all the points that I was able to take out of this movie. If you haven't already watched the Ariya's Roar video, I definitely recommend just going back and just watching it. That way you get the full details of what happened to Ariya and you understand her story a little bit better. I will in the future make a new video talking about it because I feel like it's been almost 3 years and I feel like I know a lot more now than what I did before. I'm gonna try to do it this month because October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, because I do want to start talking about it a little bit more and incorporating it into my daily life, because it is something that I do live with whether I talk about it or not. I appreciate you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in my next one.